Thank you for having me. My name is Courage Cornelius Sono. I serve as the Assistant Chief Executive Officer for the Western Regional Rent Control Office. It is a privilege to discuss issues affecting tenants, issues affecting landlords, and then the broader rental housing sector. The Rent Control Department is a government institution mandated to regulate landlord-tenant relations, promote fairness within the rental housing sector, mediate rental disputes, and ensure compliance with Ghana's rent laws. Our objective basically is, not to take sides, but to ensure that both landlords and tenants enjoy their rights and fulfill their obligations under the rent laws. Challenges. Challenges. There are several challenges. First is the persistent issue of excessive rent advance demands from the landlords, which of course places enormous financial pressure on then prospective tenants, and then tenants renewing their tenancies. Second is the growing shortage of affordable housing, particularly in urban centers. As we have it now, it's widely known that the housing deficit stands over 1.5 million housing units. Secondly, we continue to encounter disputes arising from tenancy agreements, simply because most of such agreements are informal. They are not documented. So landlords tend out to do whatever they want, just as the tenants also do whatever they want. Unlawful eviction is another challenge that the Rent Control Department often deals with. Another major challenge within the rental housing sector is poor maintenance of rented premises. The landlords often also complain a lot on rent arrears. Another challenge I would like to talk about, which often is not discussed, is the significant mismatch or increasing mismatch between income level and rental cost. Many households are finding it difficult to secure decent accommodation within their financial means. It is a challenge that is eating deep into the ordinary Ghanaian renter. Last challenge, or another challenge within the rental housing sector, is the lack of awareness of legal rights and responsibility amongst the landlords and then the tenants. The consequences are far-reaching. Housing insecurity, it affects family stability, it affects productivity, it affects health, it affects education, and overall, it affects the quality of life of the ordinary Ghanaian citizen. When people tend to spend a disproportionate share of their income on rent, of course, it reduces their ability to meet other basic needs, and then the ability for them to contribute meaningfully to the economic development of this dear nation. Effective regulations, it requires a multi-stakeholder approach. Honestly, first, there must be a stronger enforcement of existing laws and regulation. Second, there should be public education. Public education must be intensified so that the landlords and the tenants understand their rights and then their responsibility. Third, the government must invest in affordable housing projects to increase the housing supply and reduce pressure on the rental market. Tenancy agreements should be properly documented to minimize disputes. Finally, the very institution responsible for housing regulation, which is the Rent Control Department, must be adequately resourced to monitor compliance, mediate disputes effectively, and provide accessible service to the public. My candid advice to policymakers is that we must begin to view rent not merely as a commercial transaction, but as a matter of dignity, security, and social development. Access to decent housing is fundamental to human beings and national development. Therefore, policies governing the rental housing sector must be designed to, protect both investment and human welfare. To strengthen regulations and improve accountability within the sector, I believe so much there is the need to mandate registrations of landlords, of tenants, and rental premises nationwide. Such a system will provide reliable data for policy formulation, enhance transparency, and enable regulatory authorities to effectively monitor the sector. Additionally, the registration of rental premises would allow the Rent Control Department and other relevant agencies to undertake periodic rent assessment and ensure that premises offered for rent meet basic standards of habitation, safety, sanitation, and structural integrity before being occupied by the tenants. Another critical reform is the enforcement of formal landlord-tenant engagement through written tenancy agreements. Too many disputes arise because parties rely on verbal arrangements that are often difficult to verify and then to enforce. Every tenancy should be governed by a written agreement that clearly spells out rights, obligations, and expectations of the engaging parties. Furthermore, I recommend that all tenancy agreements be filed with the Rent Control Office within the district. The Rent Control Office is supposed to be within every district as part of a mandatory validation process. This would significantly strengthen enforcement efforts, provide an official record of tenancy arrangements, and assist in the early resolution of disputes. It would also help reduce the numerous landlord-tenant conflicts that currently burdens both families and then regulatory institutions. The informal nature of engagement as we have it now, mostly the cases come to the rent office and it's difficult for the rent office to prevail on a matter. This leads to matters being escalated to the rent magistrate, which often than not over several sittings refer such cases to ADRs, which are often not resolved and back to the court. So the back and forth would be, resolved if we enforce, the formal engagements of landlords and tenants and encourage such tenancy agreements to be duly filed with the Rent Control Department. Ultimately, the issuance of rent card or similar validation documents should be tied to the registrations of landlords, tenants, rental premises, and the filing of a valid subsisting tenancy agreement. This will create a more structured, transparent and accountable rental housing system that will promote the interest of all the stakeholders whilst promoting sustainable housing development in the country. This is a subject that most property owners don't like us to talk about. However, rent taxation is an important but often overlooked component of housing policy. As a nation, we must recognize that an efficient and transparent rent tax system can serve as a valuable source of public revenue while promoting, accountability within the rental housing sector. More importantly, registration provides government with access to credible data on rental income and housing transactions. Rent payments are income received by property owners and like other forms of income, they create tax obligations. However, effective tax administration is difficult when rental transactions are undocumented or operate largely outside formal regulatory system. By registering rental premises and tenancy agreements, government institutions can access accurate information that supports the assessment and collection of rent-related taxes in a fair and efficient manner. This improves compliance, broadens the tax net, and reduces revenue leakages within the housing sector. The ultimate goal should not simply be to collect more taxes. Rather, the revenues generated from a well-regulated rental sector should be strategically reinvested into affordable housing programs and rental assistance schemes, and then housing infrastructure development. Such investment would expand the housing supply and create a more affordable options for ordinary Ghanaians, and that is what governance should stand for. This is particularly important at this time when many tenants have limited alternative and are increasingly dependent on private estates, agencies and property intermediaries for accommodation. By using revenues from the rental housing sector to support affordable housing initiatives, government can stimulate competition, increase housing accessibility, and reduce excessive market concentration. When we formalize the rental housing sector through registration, we do not only protect landlords, tenants, we also generate the necessary data necessary to improve governance, enhance tax mobilization, and finance sustainable housing solution for future generations. My message to landlords, to tenants, to agents and other stakeholders within the rental housing sector, it's simple. As a landlord, when you are giving up when you complete your premises, do well to come to the rent control office near you to get yourself registered. As a tenant, before you make any form of payment for your rental dwelling, demand for a tenancy agreement. When properties are registered, it affords the rent control department the opportunity to perform a very important function under the Rent Act, which is one, to create or maintain a register of vacant premises so that any accommodation seeker can comfortably and reliably walk into the rent control office to have access to accommodation to rent. So the exploitations of viewing fees and etc. from the agent will come to a naught. It also affords the rent control department the opportunity to keep a rent register, which of course assists the department in carrying out its enforcement or regulatory functions. My final message to all out there is that housing is a shared responsibility. Landlords, we know you deserve a fair return on your investment, whilst tenants also deserve safe, decent and secure accommodation. Mutual respect, compliance with the law, and dialogue are essential to building a rental housing sector that serves the interest of all stakeholders. Thank you so much. Let's continue to work together to promote fairness, accountability, and sustainable housing for all. For Ghana belongs to you and me.